Well, one of the first things that the Fundraising Think Tank might do is to think about a fundraiser's Bill of Rights. You know, for half a century we've had a donor Bill of Rights from the US, as the kind of first country to think about those issues, but we haven't had a fundraiser's Bill of Rights. And maybe fundraisers have the right to be considered to be a professional. Maybe they have the right to be, have access to a professional education. Maybe they have the right to expect that they'll have a significant amount of board involvement in the fundraising that they're doing. And maybe, just maybe, they should have the right to expect that the organisation, if they succeed in that, would be proud of the fundraising that they've accomplished. Well, that's not an exhaustive list, and you can imagine how a brain's trust of people could come up with something that would be something we could be proud of. And equally, you can imagine then how impactful that might be in kind of changing the perception of fundraising within the sector. There's almost too much apology taking place for fundraising right now. And actually, if we can get boards to understand what fundraising is about and the contribution that we can make, maybe we can shift that a little bit. What else? Well, we'd like to consider putting together a longer-term study of philanthropists. So in other words, what's the journey that people go on when they decide that they've had enough of business and they want to apply the knowledge and expertise that they've gained to something a bit different, and they decide that they want to try and solve some of the world's big problems? Well, what is the kind of process that they go through when they do that? What are the big challenges that they're going to encounter when they do that? And how do they begin to overcome some of those challenges? So that you begin to capture some of the body of knowledge that you could then expose other philanthropists to when they begin that process, when they start that journey. So they don't have to do all the trial and error stuff that other people have done. They can learn from what's gone on before and an academic perspective on what's gone on before to help them deal with some of the decisions that they'll have to take. We're also going to put together a panel study looking at donor behaviour. So tracking how individual giving changes over time. So we can begin to answer some of those questions about, so do people always give through that channel, or do they kind of grow into some of the more traditional channels over time? And if that's the case, what does that mean for our fundraising practice? And then finally on here, the other thing that we're going to be known for in Plymouth is putting together a panel of field experiments from the new domain of philanthropic psychology. The early work we've done on that has increased giving by between 10 and 35%, simply by playing with words in the solicitation. And the significant thing about that is that we've increased giving by 10 to 35%, depending on what it is that we're playing with. But when we do that, we increase how good people feel about their giving. So that in the long term, that increase in giving becomes sustainable. That's what's distinctive about this work. And there's a lot of other work that can go on in that domain to add value to the relationships that we have with supporters. It comes back to what I said earlier. We've been hung up on delivering impact and communicating that. We need to think a little bit more about when we fundraise, what are we actually doing to the people that we're communicating with?